We have this narrative that 18 to 25-year-olds are idiots, but on every objective scientific measure of intelligence, they're actually the smartest. We need to start realizing young people's brains, yes, they're still developing, but they're able to work on goal-directed behavior. It's just often not the goals that the adults want them to be working on.
Dr. David Yeager is a professor of developmental psychology, a best-selling author, and a world-leading expert on mindset and adolescent development. His groundbreaking research empowers individuals to redefine their potential and explores how belief influences behavior, resilience, performance, belonging, and motivation.
So what's the growth mindset idea? It's the idea that your brain isn't stuck being not smart or not. Your brain is instead, we argue, more like a muscle. So just like muscles get stronger, so too does the brain get smarter and get stronger connections the more that it applies itself. What we found is that that growth mindset message at a time when young people are questioning themselves, asking themselves like, can I do this? Is this too hard? Was able to unlock.
The Icon is a show where we learn life lessons from those who may shape the icon in each of us. And today I'm fascinated to be learning more about our brains, our beliefs, and our mindset. Dr. David Yeager, welcome to the Icons by Motiversity.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, I was doing quite a bit of research into your work. I find it fascinating. I think that it touches on everyone where they're at in life, but everyone also connects to where they were in life, which is pretty interesting. And you did a study in 2019, which I think kind of opens the door to what you do and the impact it has. You're doing mindset interventions with grade 9 students, I believe.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that and what was the impact?
Yeah, so in 2019, we published a study that really definitive test of the idea that what you believe can shape who you become. And what we did is we took young people on the edge of one of the most difficult life transitions that we experience in our culture, and it's starting high school. You are leaving the kind of nest of a close group of friends in middle school, teachers who are caring for you, and you're in often a larger school, new friends, new academic demands, many opportunities to question yourself, doubt yourself, wonder, maybe I'm not smart enough to be successful here. And we tested the idea that a brief but powerful exposure to the concept of a growth mindset could help adolescents view their difficulties as an opportunity to grow rather than as a sign that they're not smart enough. So very concretely, we, with myself, Carol Dweck, Greg Walton, other psychologists at Stanford and other places, created a short intervention. It takes about 25 minutes per session, and there's 2 sessions. And teenagers completed it over the internet. So they were just in a classroom with 30 other kids. Some kids got our growth mindset. Other kids got a control that said interesting information about the brain, but didn't convey the growth mindset idea. So what's the growth mindset idea? It's the idea that your brain isn't stuck being not smart or not. Your brain is instead, we argue, more like a muscle. So just like muscles get stronger the more that you exercise, so too does the brain get smarter and get stronger connections the more that it applies itself to rigorous content. And what we found is that that growth mindset message at a time when young people are questioning themselves, asking themselves like, can I do this? Is this too hard? Was able to unlock motivation in the sense that they, after receiving the treatment, asked for harder math homework, for example. They said, if I try hard and fail, it doesn't mean I'm dumb. It means I'm actually just improving my strategies. And then a whole year later, they got higher grades, even in classes like math and science that are often the most rigorous classes in high school. And then in our new work, we find benefits that are lasting all the way to the end of high school, 4 years later, from very short exposure to this growth mindset message.
Whoa. That's amazing. I mean, 25 minutes twice can have that kind of long-lasting effect. And it feels like it's all kind of centered around this term growth mindset. But even before we get to growth mindset, we use the word mindset. And I think a lot of people kind of understand what that means. What is mindset?
Mindset is just your belief about the world and how it works. It's a causal theory that, just like a scientific theory shapes the data that a scientist looks for and how they interpret that data, right? So until we had the theory of relativity, there were certain things you could observe in the cosmos didn't make any sense to you. Once you have the theory of relativity, you're like, oh, okay, I understand what's happening with time and space or whatever. Your mindset is like that, except it's about your daily experience. So the data you're looking at is, oh, I'm trying to learn something new and it's hard. Or I thought I was going to change in this way and I failed. Or I tried to give a great presentation or a great performance and it felt really difficult. And then you have to interpret that. What does it mean? So a mindset gives you a lens for interpreting it either as a sign that I'm not good enough, I'm going to fail. That's what we would call a fixed mindset. Or the fact that I'm challenged means I'm doing something ambitious and hard and important. And the process that I'm going through is actually helping me to improve. And that's what the path you take with a growth mindset.
I say sometimes, I don't know, I was curious to ask you because you're the expert in this, but I sometimes say there's kind of two powerful ways to change your life, probably more, but one's a habit, one's a mindset. And habit is, the same decision you're making a million times, brush your teeth every night. Whereas a mindset is the same perspective that's going to drive a million different decisions. And would you say that kind of holds true for mindset, or does it feel like it's that idea that one perspective is going to really shape and help you interpret almost a million different things that will come your way?
Well, I would say that the way you form a habit is by making a decision a bunch of times, but you tend to only make that decision if it makes sense to you. And so a mindset is a belief that could lead you to make a pattern of choices again and again and again, because it's the most reasonable way to act given your perspective. So for example, imagine you're in a hard course, university or high school, and you have a question. Should you raise your hand? Should you go to office hours? Should you join a study group? Well, those are great ways to learn something that you don't know how to do. But if you're in a fixed mindset, it doesn't make sense to do that, because the fact that you have a question means that you're not talented. It means you're not smart. It means other people will look down on you, or it means that teachers will say, you should have understood that the first time. And if you were really a great student, you would have understood it. And the fact that you didn't means you're not a great. So the meaning of the behavior is threatening. And so people don't do it. And then over time, if you never ask for help, never get clarification, and study alone, and you're doing hard stuff, you're going to perform worse than you would otherwise. And people would say you have a bad study habit. But it's not just a habit that's like your routine on the way to work. That habit is a result of a worldview that affected what behaviors made sense to you.
I think a lot of students just heard that. I think, that idea of kind of really breaking down how they're interpreting just their day-to-day experience as a student. So the growth mindset, it feels like a pretty powerful notion. What have been the implications of people who adopt a growth mindset or have a growth mindset?
Yeah, one of my favorite studies is an experiment by David Nussbaum, and it was on how you defend your ego, depending on if you have a fixed or a growth mindset. And in this study, and I'll loosely summarize it, the research participants completed a task where they were graded on their work and they got a low score, let's say a 30. Okay. But beforehand, they had been given a message to change their mindset towards more of a fixed mindset view or more of a growth mindset view. And the hypothesis was that the mindset you had would shape the way that you recover your self-esteem after a failure. And in a fixed mindset, what did they do? They looked down on the people who got like a 10 or a 12%. At least I'm not as dumb as them. So the way to make yourself feel better in that case is to do a downward comparison. In a growth mindset, they clicked on the information from the people who got a 70, 80, or 90 to figure out what steps they took to do better. So success isn't threatening in a growth mindset. It's actually a good source of information. And I think about that a lot where, wandering around, we're often comparing ourselves to others and we're trying to figure out, like, am I good enough? Will people accept me? Am I valued? And if you live in a world in which you only value yourself if you remind yourself of how you're not as bad as other terrible people, that's one way to feel better, but it doesn't help you learn and improve. Because then you say, oh, I guess I don't need to be any better because at least I'm not as bad as these losers over here. So I like this idea of a growth mindset unlocks unthreatening upward comparison where you learn how to break down the performance steps that somebody took to become better, and you put yourself in a position as a learner. And imagine that happening dozens, hundreds, or thousands of times over years and years, area under the curve. That's why a growth mindset should lead to more expertise and more growth.
I love that idea, that comparing down or comparing up. And for someone who's kind of just encountering this, is it kind of that simple? Like, let's say they find themselves and they have been comparing down. Could they just flip that? Or is there something they can do to start to actually compare up? Like, what allows somebody to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset?
You could be a participant in one of our experiments.
25 minutes twice at grade 9?
I mean, I think that it's not obvious that you can just will yourself to a growth mindset. We worry a lot that as the idea has become popular, it turns into a meme. Like if you Google image search growth mindset motivational posters, for some reason, you get pages and pages of cat memes. So it'll be like a cat reaching for a cookie, and it'll be like growth mindset. And I don't know what that cat is doing or why it's involved in growth mindset. And so if anyone sees that, please don't blame me. I'm not involved in the cat memes for growth mindset. But so I don't think it's something where you lie to yourself. I think it's something where you have to question the beliefs our society and culture have given us, right? And there's a way in which a fixed mindset is a way of keeping a kind of rank ordering in culture in our society of who gets access to what and who gets to be what. And we need to figure out where those ideas are being applied and where they're harming us and keeping us from our potential. I think that at any point, any person has access to both fixed mindset thinking and growth mindset thinking because they're both prevalent in our society. And so it's not a matter of I'm a bad person or I'm flawed because I see this residual of a fixed mindset. Everyone has access to it because it's an idea in our culture. Instead, it's, as Mary Murphy, who wrote a great book, Cultures of Growth, argues, there are triggers in our society that remind us of this fixed mindset worldview. And you kind of need to be aware of what they are. And so they could be the person who is effortlessly perfect in every way. It could be the way sports commentators talk about someone being a natural, just like listen to the Olympics. And it could be the way that students talk to each other in a classroom. I'll tell you that when I was a graduate student at Stanford, my undergraduate was in like philosophy and great books. So I didn't take any statistics. And then I was a middle school teacher, again, took no statistics. So I show up at Stanford and I learned that you have to know statistics to publish scientific papers. Like, okay, it's time for me to learn that. So I started from the beginning. I even took advanced undergraduate econ stats at Stanford. So I'm sitting next to 19-year-olds. But some other PhD students do the same thing too. And we're sitting there and a whole lecture goes by. It's all Greek letters. It's not like, looks like Greek. It's literally Greek letters. And I turned to my friend. I'm like, I didn't understand one word of that. Thinking she would say, oh yeah, you're right. It's hard. And then she just said, you didn't learn that in high school? I was like, Alicia, that is not a good thing to say. Like, I'm feeling vulnerable right here. So I think part of it is helping friends to support your growth mindset by not pretending like you're supposed to know everything and not valuing only effortless expertise.
This growth versus fixed mindset. Obviously you can kind of start to see the power of what that would mean. You've been uncovering other mindsets that are pretty significant in people's worlds, in their lives. What are some of those other mindsets you're uncovering?
So Charles Dweck and I conducted these experiments about the impact of a growth mindset directly delivered to an individual. And for instance, in our 2019 National Study of Learning Mindsets, as I mentioned, a short intervention had an effect a year later, and our new analyses 4 years later. But those effects were primarily observed in contexts where the idea of a growth mindset was supported by either the peer culture or the teacher's beliefs. And so what we were amazed to find is that it really mattered what the adults in the school believed when the students got the growth mindset message. So think about, and the same ideas would apply at university, at work, et cetera, but let's just take the example of a ninth grader. So I'm a high schooler, start high school. I go to the computer lab. I learn, hey, my brain is like a muscle. I can get smarter. Awesome. Great news. Then I get to my math class and I'm like, all right, this is confusing for me. Therefore, I'm going to grow. I'm like in the gym right now. Teacher, I have a question. And the teacher says, I already explained this to you. The fact that you don't know it means you weren't paying attention, that you don't care, and you're not being serious. And your question is slowing the class down. So please stop disrupting us and read your book. Right? Now, a lot of teachers say that kind of stuff, we learned, and they have a good reason why. It's because they want kids to grow up being accountable and independent and responsible. So they're tough on kids. They say the world is difficult and it's time for you to learn responsibility. But from the kids' perspective, they're like, what was all this nonsense about mistakes being my friend? Like that felt like a lie. And I'll tell you what, 15-year-olds are like evolution's perfectly designed hypocrisy detectors. They're so good at noticing an inconsistency between a belief that they were told they're supposed to have and what's actually the case with the way the class works. So what we found is that you have to think, if you want to have an entire culture of growth, as Mary Murphy has described, then you have to think about the mindsets of the leaders in an organization. Whether it's teachers creating a growth mindset culture, or it's managers at a company, or even parents at home. And that led me to characterize the mindsets of adults in a way where we could say, who are the people who create a growth mindset culture? And who are the people who create a fixed mindset culture? There are three mindsets that we found that help explain this. The growth mindset leaders have something I call a mentor mindset. And this is a combination of very high standards and very high support. So true mentor mindset leaders who support a student's growth mindset, they're not pushovers. They're not handing out growth mindset stickers and patting you on the back and saying, great job, for no real accomplishment. Instead, they give you legitimately difficult things to do, things that are very hard. So to be concrete, for years, I kind of paused my academic research and I stopped doing experiments in the lab for the most part. And I just started following great leaders who create growth mindset cultures. I went to Microsoft and found their best manager. I went to the NBA, found the best shooting coach for young players. And I looked in schools and I found someone who gets the most out of students. So who was an overperformer when you do a statistical analysis of how well the class should do based on prior results. And you find the people who dramatically overperform relative to expectation. What I found in every case is that they're doing a version of this mentor mindset, very demanding, but very supportive. One of the teachers I follow is a guy named Sergio Estrada, teaches at Riverside High School in El Paso, Texas. And Riverside, because you can see the river, is the border of Mexico out the window. And at Riverside, about 2% of kids are college ready based on their SATs. And every year, 95% pass college physics. Okay, so unbelievable overperformance. Now so what's the stereotype of the great teacher? Maybe for some people, it's kind, friendly, supportive, emotionally responsive. And at some level, that is true of Sergio. But one of the first things I heard when I interviewed his students was how often they cry. And you wouldn't think the greatest equity promoting teacher in America has students who cry all the time, but they do. And why is that? Not because of something he does to them. He's not mean. It's because physics is legitimately hard. That mastering the secrets of our physical universe, something that for thousands of years human beings had no idea how to do. And we ask every 16-year-old to memorize that stuff in 3 to 5 months. And so he just knows it's hard, not because he invented physics, not because he's mean. It's like, if you want to have access to certain careers or even just certain expertise, a lot of it goes through physics, logic, reasoning, problem solving, abstract thinking, right? Multiple right answers, argumentation. A lot of those cognitive skills are trained in high school and later college physics classes. Other classes too, but it's just a great example. And so there's a story I write about in my book where one young woman was doing a problem set at 10:30, 9:30 at night and contacts Sergio Estrada, this great mentor mindset teacher, through the app, the homework app, and says, I'm really stuck. I don't know how to do this. I'm overwhelmed and I'm crying. Right. So what would a normal teacher do? Right. One normal response is, it's 9:30. Like, I'm doing stuff. Like, see you later. Right. Or suck it up also. Just do your work. That's what I call an enforcer mindset. That's all standards, no support. Another reasonable response is, I'm so sorry. Don't worry about the work. We'll talk about it tomorrow. You're going to be fine. Just go to sleep and get some rest. Don't stress. That's what I call a protector mindset. That's the idea of, my job is to protect you from any distress that you might experience based on the work we're doing together. Because maybe you're vulnerable or the world is too demanding. I can't possibly expect that of you. Sergio doesn't do either of those things. He has a mentor mindset, high standards, high support. And he says, all right, take a picture of the problem you've done so far. Show me where you are. And then let's take a look at it. She shows the picture and he says, okay, I see that you've done this and this. What would happen if you changed that? And then he's at home watching Netflix with his wife. So he's like, all right, Bridgerton or whatever he's watching. I don't know. And so 30 minutes, 45 minutes go by and the student says, oh, I see it now. I understand it. I'm not crying. See you tomorrow. Right. And it just took a second for him to do that. And the student had to do all the thinking, but he did know the right question to ask to get her unstuck in the right moment. And I asked him, I was like, Sergio, this is right after the pandemic too. I was like, how did you have the self-control to not jump in and answer the question for her? Right? I mean, you know how she will be the first in her family to go to college. Like, her parents haven't taken physics before. Like, why did you make her do hard thinking late at night when she was crying? And he said, that question was weird to him. It never would have occurred to him to do anything else. And he's like, I would never deprive a student of a chance to know that they could master physics. And a lot of teachers jump in to save the day, or parents or managers, because they're so worried secondhand for someone else's vulnerability and stress. But it's more about the discomfort of the leader. Whereas if you really want someone to grow, you give them high standards so that way they have something to grow into, but you don't make them do it alone, because if it's beyond what they currently know how to do, which in most growth experiences should be beyond what you know how to do, then they need support to do that. So, Harold Dweck and I observed these leaders like Sergio, our Microsoft manager, NBA coach, parenting coach, and they all had some version of this mentor mindset. And that's what caused me to then write this book, 10 to 25, where we take the secrets that we've learned from these great leaders and we've tried to share them with the world.
Whoa. I feel like if you're, I don't know, a parent and you got to pull your kid to YouTube and watch that last 10 minutes. If you're a leader, you got to watch. I mean, that what you just described there is so, I think it makes sense of so many hard experiences, reasons why people are getting stuck. So if I get that right, so there's a mentor mindset, there's an enforcer mindset, all standards, no support. And then there's that protector mindset, which is essentially the opposite.
Yeah.
Is that right? Whoa. What are the other secrets in 10 to 25? Like, what else do you feel like is really important for whether I've got a couple of questions that kind of came out of that, but I think I'll start there. But what else are you discovering is really helpful for people who are either leading or trying to mentor somebody else?
Yeah. So I call it a mentor mindset, not because you have to be a mentor in a formal way, like you're a big brother, big sister, although that's a perfectly good program. It's not, you have to meet with someone for coffee on Thursdays and fire hose them with life advice. That's not the kind of mentoring I'm talking about. It's more that if you are in a more established position as a leader and you have expertise, then you're aligning your resources, time, expertise, material resources, maybe, with someone else's long-term growth, development, and improvement. And I think the worry is that mentor is a loaded term in our culture. And mentor, of course, comes from the Odyssey. So the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom, her avatar is Mentor, and Mentor spends 20 years watching Telemachus, Odysseus' son, when he's off fighting, the war with the Trojans. And so you don't have to be the goddess of wisdom to be a mentor. All you have to do is align your resources with a young person or a mentee's long-term growth and development. And that can take a lot of different forms. Interestingly, though, people don't do that if they fundamentally have a negative view of the people that they're trying to mentor. So there's a belief in our culture that I call the neurobiological incompetence model. And yeah, there's plenty of syllables in that term. And the idea is that young people's brains are awash in hormones. Their prefrontal cortices don't work yet. And they are, as a result, immature, short-sighted, lazy, selfish, etc., wimpy, so on. And that's an issue because if you fundamentally believe young people aren't capable of self-control or logical reasoning or impressive accomplishment, then you don't have high expectations that are met with support because they would be dumb. It would be a waste, right? And instead you resort to either enforcer or protector. And the reason why is if young people are short-sighted, impulsive, whatever, then I need to maintain high standards to protect them and protect the world from their poor choices. And that's when you get the more kind of dictator, authoritarian, yelling, telling, blaming, shaming approach. Or there's a phrase I coined in the book that I call grown-splaining. And I'm going to now mansplain grown-splaining to you. And grown-splaining is when the adult thinks through everything that they think the young person should do, and they work it out in their own head, and then they just tell the young person as loudly as possible to do what the grown-up said that they should do. It's kind of like if an American visits a foreign country but doesn't speak the language, they just yell English at that other person louder, right? That's kind of like how adults talk to young people in an enforcer mindset. And it's because it comes from the underlying belief that they are incompetent. And only I, the adult with the mature brain, can do the thinking. Another approach, though, if you have this incompetence belief, is if you think they're incompetent, but I want to be nice. Right? If they're incompetent and I have to be tough, then enforcer makes sense. If it's they're incompetent and I want to be nice, then that's how you get into protector. Low standards, high support. So if I think young people have gone through so much, they're so stressed, they're so overwhelmed, and they can't really do a lot on their own, then it's mean for me to uphold very high standards because they're just going to sit there in a puddle of tears and, in the fetal position, crying all night. And that's mean. That's cruel for me to do that to them. And so I should lower standards. And you see why people do that. It's a way of feeling like a good person, right? And I'm gonna be honest. When I was younger, I lived for a while at an orphanage in Chile. So I ran youth programming in a town south of Santiago. And my mindset was these kids have experienced poverty and trauma and abandonment, and they don't need some American showing up, yelling at them, enforcing a bunch of rules. So I let them run the show. And it was a terrible idea. And there was Another, at the orphanage, they called us Tio and Tia. So I was Tio David, but there was a woman in her 40s. Her name was Tia Carmen. And Tia Carmen said, David, yo soy así, which means I'm like this. And then she said, pero las cariño, or like, but they love me and I love them. So she was saying, like, got to be firm, but loving. And that's the essence of the mentor mindset, is the tough but loving approach. And tell you what, those kids listened to Tia Carmen, but they also hugged her legs left and right. And so I think that if you want to start adopting less of the enforcer or protector and more of the mentor, where we have to start is our beliefs about young people and their abilities. And it turns out that even though our society thinks of, let's say, the college years, 18 to 25, as a time for dumb decisions, right? If you look at scores on Raven's progressive matrices, which is the culture-free IQ test. So this is your working memory, your in-back, it's your, basically your mind's ability to reason about complex and abstract concepts. Ability peaks from 18 to 25. You are dumber every year after that for the rest of your life. So all the baby boomers that are like, these teenagers are idiots, it's like, well, no, you're actually dumber than the 20-year-olds that you're talking about. If you look at raw processing power in the mind, if you look at crystallized knowledge, like experience, that stays flat for a long time until dementia kicks in. But we have this narrative that 18 to 25-year-olds are idiots. But on every objective scientific measure of intelligence, they're actually the smartest. And so there's some mismatch between how we think about them as a culture and how we treat them, and what the reality is. And what I want to argue is that we need to start realizing young people's brains, yes, they're still developing, but they're able to work on goal-directed behavior. It's just often not the goals that the adults want them to be working on. There's a different set of goals that young people have. And so in a mentor mindset, you figure out how to captivate the young person's interest and motivation and attention, rather than saying that they're just not motivated. And I think we need to get rid of that language about, I'm not motivated, or I'm not a motivated person, or this is not a motivated generation. That's nonsense. Human beings from birth desire challenge and difficulty. We want to understand the world. You look at a baby, and a baby they're watching objects roll to figure out, are they solid or not? Like, are they going to bump into each other? They're reading adults' eyes to figure out who's going to care for me and be reliable. They're learning the subtleties of language and grammar and syntax. Every typically developing baby on the planet will acquire the complexities of grammar in their native tongue by 2-3 years old, and they'll do it without a single worksheet, without a sticker chart or a chore chart or a stamp or anything like that. And it's amazingly complex and hard. It's not straightforward at all to acquire language. Anyone who's tried to learn a second or third language would tell you that. But every baby does it in their native language. So that's telling us something, that the human brain is wired to learn from challenge and difficulty. It's not wired to be lazy and in a resting state. So if later in life it feels like we can't be motivated, it's not like the fundamental workings of the brain have changed. It's that we become more attuned to reasons for learning and social, cultural, and contextual factors, like our relationships with others, right? And why I'm trying to do this, and what goal does it serve, and whose goal, and where did I get that goal from? Those bigger questions start influencing where we deploy our considerable cognitive abilities and our amazing birthright of human learning. And this is a long way of saying, we can't start blaming younger generations for not being motivated and saying they can't learn or they don't care. We need to figure out what they care about. And the example I often use is people say, well, they're not doing they're not factoring trinomials and doing their homework, or they're not doing their problem sets, or they're not learning coding, or they can't practice. Therefore, they're not motivated. But if you ask the young people to sneak out of the house and go to a party, they're really good at planning that. Like they'll like, who do I have to lie to? You know, and like who am I manipulating? And give me a map of the sewers, and I'm gonna sneak it. Like they're like General Patton in the European theater, right? Thinking 12 steps ahead, and 4-dimensional chess, right? And so it's like, how do we captivate motivation? It's not whether you're motivated or not. And for a lot of young people, my argument in my book is that what motivates them is a sense of social status and respect. The thrilling opportunity to earn prestige in the eyes of someone whose opinions you care about never feels as good as it does from like the moment puberty starts until, mid to late 20s. This idea that you just crushed it in front of your boss's boss at work in your 20s, or you've given a killer presentation that people are like, wow, that's amazing. That feels so good. Young people will work hard for that. They will be dedicated, diligent, self-controlled, disciplined. They're less likely to be motivated for the idea of, oh, if I do this worksheet, I'll get a little bit better grade, and then I'll get into the next class so I can get into that college, and then get a slightly better job so that in my 30s, I can hardly afford a mortgage. Like that's like 20 years waiting for the second marshmallow. And that's just a bad argument for a lot of young people.
I mean, this idea that motivation is like a birthright, I think that's super powerful. What creates drive for people?
Yeah, so there's a cultural view that humans are only motivated by they're most motivated by short-term self-interest. And it's this idea that if you create immediate financial incentives or recognition incentives for people, then that's the way to capture their motivation. And the psychologist Dale Miller at Stanford Business School calls this the norm of self-interest. And the idea that everybody thinks self-interest is the most important motivator. And so then when they try to motivate other people, they only appeal to self-interest. And then the people that are being motivated are like, well, that doesn't really work for me. But it would be weird for me to think of anything else besides self-interest because everybody's only talking about self-interest. And so this creates something we call pluralistic ignorance, which is that everybody agrees on the same wrong idea. And even though everyone knows it's the wrong idea, that's all we talk about it because it'd be weird to talk about anything else. In our surveys, we have asked young people again and again to name an issue in society that makes them mad and makes them think the world is unfair. And tell you what, they can answer that question. Like 95% or so give a very good answer. And they talk about economic inequality, war, political division, the fact that no one can solve any problems anymore. Obviously pandemics, right? Global warming. Young people are very upset that the world is ending and our generation is doing nothing about it, except yelling at each other. That's under the surface all the time. And in our studies, what we say is, okay, well, if you had a stronger brain, how could you use that to start solving one or more of those issues, especially the one you care most about? Young people love answering that question. They do it all the time in our studies, and they're very creative. And what we find is that if we give them that message about have a stronger brain to change some social justice issue or something bigger than yourself, self-transcendent purpose, we call it, then they show amazing self-discipline. So this idea of being a self-controlled person, right, is a little flawed because it makes you think you have to have strong urges and impulses that you're suppressing all the time. In fact, if acquiring skills and having discipline is the route to being awesome because you're changing the world, then it transforms the drudgery of self-discipline into the thrill of mattering, right? It's this idea that my sacrifice now is a contribution to something bigger than myself. And that makes me valuable. It brings me a sense of recognition. I matter in the eyes of others. And like, what is more important than mattering at a time when society is telling you are of no consequence and you're a dumb woke idiot, right? And so I think that what we found is that, for instance, when young people write about a purpose and how that stronger brain would help them make a difference, then and we give them a task that secretly tracks whether they do boring math or goof off on the internet. They do more math and watch fewer YouTube videos and play less Tetris, and they goof off less. And what that shows us is that this, in all of us, is a latent desire to matter, especially when we're young, in that early young adult adolescent period. And we should tap into that sense of purpose far more than we should just think about the rational next step of my next grade, my next wage, my next job, etc.
That flip from I'm controlling, I'm repressing, to I'm actually like unleashing, I'm exploring meaning, I'm exploring how to matter. I mean, that's fascinating. Part of me is also wondering about the response people may have to this like high standard response, which oftentimes creates, I don't know, a feeling of stress. How does that work into this?
Yeah. So a great mentor often pushes a young person explicitly or implicitly beyond what they're capable of doing. And that naturally evokes a stress response. Stress could just be defined as the experience of having something conflict with a goal of yours. That's the kind of basic definition of stress. And that's not always bad, because sometimes the world is hard to deal with, or the route to something important and impressive goes through something difficult you haven't mastered. So take the example of you have to give an important presentation to your boss's boss, or if you're a consultant, give it to a client or a student to a group presentation. So that's a stressor. Is that a good or bad thing? Well, in our society's language, it's always bad, because if you're stressed, then you're going to get overwhelmed, then you have mental health problems, and then you know, as I said, you curl up in a ball in the fetal position and cry yourself to sleep. That's what society tells you happens when you have lots of stress. But another perspective on the exact same experience is, oh, wow, I get to go impress someone who might give me a promotion, right? Or I get to go show my colleagues in class that I've learned a ton, so they can be impressed and they're going to think I'm a great student and or just a smart person, right? So there are all these positive things that could happen from performance, but they're still stressful. Like if I'm going to ski, people are skiers, and I'm at the top of a double black diamond and I'm at the edge and I'm about to go over, if my heart isn't racing, right, and my palms aren't sweaty, that's very weird, because this is a performance situation. Now, do I think I'm a good skier or not is the next question. If I'm at the top of a double black diamond and I'm a bad skier, then all I'm imagining is the yard sale that's about to happen. Just give me an explosion of gloves and goggles and skis and everything, right? But just mangled limbs everywhere. So that's what we call a threat type stress response, where the demand is very high, but I don't think I have the resources to meet the demand. A challenge type response is I'm at the top of the double black diamond. I'm like, yeah, but I'm a good skier. I've done this a bunch of times. So I'm amped. My heart's racing. My palms are sweaty. I'm stressed by physiological measures, but it's because my body is mobilizing energy to get oxygen to my muscles so I can draw on my muscle memory and then ski down the moguls and then have a blast. Both are high stress situations, but in one, demand exceeded resources, and that is a threat. But in the latter, demand was met with resources, and that's a challenge type stress. The big insight from not just my work, Jeremy Jameson, Wendy Mendez, Jim Blaskovich, a whole host of psychologists and performance experts, I'm just summarizing their work, is that if you convince yourself that you have the resources to meet a high demand, or you just remind yourself that they're there, or you're actually given them, then you can end up in a challenge type stress response, and your body shows a very different pattern of results. And the surprising thing is, when you feel like you're stressed out and you're in a threat type situation, you can use what we call reappraisal to reappraise or reinterpret that physiological arousal as your body getting resources. It's not your body's preparing for defeat. It's your body is preparing to optimize performance. And Aaliyah Crum, who's a well-known Stanford psychologist, calls us a stress can be enhancing mindset. It's the idea that stress can enhance performance. Stress doesn't debilitate performance.
So in between stress and that response or that allocation of resources is really this hinge point where we can kind of attribute or change our belief in terms of how we make sense of.
Yeah. And you can do it to yourself.
Yeah.
Or the right mentor at the right time can give you the right message, or you can do that for someone else. I'll tell you a quick story to illustrate this. So a few years ago, my daughter, who was 7th grade at the time, was getting in the car on the way to school, and she had a cello audition. So for first chair, and don't ask me what that means. I don't know anything about middle school orchestra. And she said, I'm nervous about the audition. I have butterflies in my stomach. The enforcer mindset would say, suck it up. Like, get to school, do your audition. The protector mindset is, let's call in and say you're sick. Don't worry about it. I know you're nervous, right? And I was writing a book on this, so I couldn't do those things because I'd be a hypocrite. And so I said, all right, Scarlett, do you know what I'm going to say to you? And she was like, yeah, you're going to tell me that the butterflies on my stomach come from me being really excited to do something. And I'm looking forward to doing something hard. So it really is a sign that it matters to me. And that when I get there, my heart's going to pump oxygenated blood to my muscles. And that's going to, when those cells have the oxygen, then they're going to perform even better. And I'm going to perform the level of my preparation. And I was like, how did you know I was going to say that? That's a very weird thing for a 7th grader to say. It's like, oh, because 2 years ago, when I was about to water ski and Scarlett was floating in the water and I was holding the skis while Uncle Luke had the boat and he was ready to hit it. And Scarlett said the same thing. I have butterflies. And I told her all this stuff. And I was like, that oxygenated blood to your arm muscle is going to help you hold onto the rope enough. So when he hits it, you're going to pop right up and ski around the lake and have a blast. And then she did. And I just floated in the water for 30 minutes as she's skied on a lake in Wisconsin. And she remembered that 2 years later. And the two things that I want to mention about that is that in that moment, there's what psychologists call undifferentiated arousal, that it was the butterflies in the stomach, the racing heart, the sweaty palms. She didn't know what to name that. And so my role as the mentor was to help her name it as this positive thing, not this negative thing. But the second point is that once you name it something, then you actually go on that different trajectory. In our laboratory experiments, we find differences in the circulation of your blood, differences in cortisol, testosterone, and performance based on the mindset we give you about your stress response. And if you do that at a right time where they could go either way and then it works out for them, then they can remember it and apply it to different situations. And that's what she was able to do years later for the cello audition, which, by the way, she nailed.
I feel like I want Scarlett to be my mentor.
She's a cool cat.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, it sounds like you've done some pretty cool stuff from Chile to being a teacher before this, all the research you're doing. What do you hope your legacy is?
Well, like as a scientist, I want to do work that's going to stand the test of time. I think I got into research not because I cared about being a professor. Like I'm a Texan, so apologies to any people who don't like Texas, but hopefully one thing that's endearing to you, even if you have a negative attitude towards Texas, is that we try not to act like we're better than anybody else, even though Texans are, of course, confident that it's the best state. But it's really just the idea that I didn't get into being a professor to be like the expert or to like be the only person who has secret knowledge. I got into it because I felt like people like me needed better answers. I was a teacher. I'm a parent of 4 kids. I teach 170 students now. For undergrad, I manage large teams. I wrote the book that I wrote because I needed to answer those questions for me in my life. And so I'm not interested in nuggets and sound bites that are designed to be like faux, clever platitudes. I want to do work where 20 years from now, they're like, yeah, if you say this, it works better than that. Or where new scientists have been like, yeah, we used to think that, and now Yeager wasn't right about this, but it did help us think about that. Like, I want to be a part of the journey of us getting smarter about motivation, smarter about resilience, smarter about persistence. And so that's why I want people to actually use the work that I'm producing. So that way we can figure out where it's working and what studies we need to do next and how we need to improve it. And I'll say, my mentor is Carol Dweck, who developed growth mindset. And I don't know, 5 years ago, she said something like, David, I've only got 25 more years of research to do. We got to get going. And I want to be like that. I want to be contributing science as much as I can for as long as I can with as many collaborators. So that way, as a society, we get smarter about motivation and performance.
Dr. David Yeager, that was awesome. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.